excited today to be joined by Paula Newby, the CEO of Predixa. So let me tell you a little bit more about Paula, who I have the privilege and honor to personally know and to be able to interact with. So besides her bio that I'm about to share, I have to say that she's an outstanding, exceptional human being before all. So Paula is the joint CEO and founder of Predixa. She draws on a wealth of experience from over 30 years in large blue chip firms, SMEs, and as an entrepreneur. Paula believes creativity and originality are the cornerstones to bringing prosperity to any business. She brings her considerable business transformation experience, natural leadership, and passionate belief that diverse and inclusive cultures can drive innovation and innovative thinking with people-centered change, creating successful organizations. Welcome, Paula, to Women for Solutions. And today we will be speaking about diversity and inclusion, the heart of company strategy. So we all know too well that for too long, D&I has languished at the bottom of a board's agenda and seen as a nice to have to appease shareholders. Personally, I have been in many organizations and worked with several that are boxing diversity and inclusion. So as organizations now are facing the growing challenges from the pandemic, many of these can only be met by bringing D&I front and center of their strategic approach and board agendas. As a D&I practitioner, I wish to see the day when D&I is at the front and center. So let's explore why and how this is important. So let me start, Paula, by asking you, do you think D&I was impacted by the pandemic? And if so, what are the trends and drivers for this impact?
Well, thank you very much, Noha, for inviting me, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you today. I know you and I could speak for hours on this subject. I mean, in terms of D&I and the pandemic, yes, I think absolutely it has impacted. But I do think that generally D&I is coming to its time, really. And I see that being impacted by two key main areas. Firstly, there's the sort of demographic and population projections for the future. And then the other is the impact of recent events. So in terms of demographic projections for the future, that can be split into two main things. The first is the Generation Y, or the millennials. Those are the people who are currently about 27 to 40. And so they are projected, of course, in the next 15 years to make up about 75% of the workforce. And of course, coming straight on their heels are the Generation Zs, or the Generation Z. And these two demographic groups are very technically savvy. They are very active on social media, and they want to work in companies that reflect the world that they see. And they also want to work in companies that have a moral compass that point in the direction that's aligned with theirs. So that's one thing. And then another demographic projection, I was reading recently to say that in the US, by I think about 2050, less than 50% of the population of the US by 2050 will be white Caucasian. So the majority of people in the US will be either African American, Hispanic, or Asian. And so these two demographic projections point at the very heart of the principle of diversity. And then if we look at recent events, we've got the Me Too movement, which obviously threw gender equality right into the heart of everybody's thinking. We've got the Black Lives Matter. And we have, of course, then the working from home, the lockdowns, the pandemic, where people were feeling disassociated, disjointed from their business cultures. And so I think all of those things mixed in together have sort of caused diversity and inclusion to move from a sort of a priority into almost the priority. And that's backed up by loads and loads of research. And I mean, you know, there is so much out there, but obviously because we're talking here on Women for Solutions, just some more female-centric research. You know, the UN predicts that if they could unleash the potential of women and girls, that this could add in excess of $12 trillion to global GDP. If the OPEC research says that if men and women are treated equally, and that women are allowed to perform equally on the world stage, that could increase the world economy by 28 trillion by 2025. There's research that shows that businesses with just at least one woman in senior management can have an impact of an increase of 44% on performance against their peers without females in management. And of course, shareholders are now looking very closely at this because they recognize that it's about reputation. And if you're not sort of really embracing some of the principles of D&I, that may have an issue on your share price. So I feel that sort of world events are driving this agenda. And I feel very strongly, you know, we firmly believe that if organizations don't get with the program and get on this train, then I think they're going to get left behind.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I see, again, a very strong synergy with sustainability, which is also in a similar sort of bucket within organizations. So definitely, I see great value in that. And so let's dig a bit deeper, you know, into the actual challenges that D&I leaders are facing. I mean, at the end, you know, it's very difficult for them to get stakeholders internally to understand the importance of making D&I a strategic priority. So what sort of challenges are these D&I leaders facing? And, what can they do to convince leaders who don't necessarily see this as strategic to look at it in a different way?
Absolutely. And I think D&I leaders, despite all that we've just said, you know, they really are facing a number of challenges. But I would say that our research and the clients that we work with, the overarching issue that they all find is, as you mentioned, this struggle to get leadership support. You know, if we were to take a classic board agenda, for instance, you know, D&I tends to sit right at the bottom of the board agenda. And what's above it? Okay, so from the last 14 months, we've got how to recapture market share and to really understand your customers. What about innovation and diversity? You know, products, we need to look at new products and new diversifying, you know, those to meet market need. Then there's the issue of perhaps digitization. You know, companies perhaps had a plan to go digital, but then the pandemic came along and they had to suddenly accelerate that with all of the associated challenges. And then perhaps mending broken supply chains, you know, factories that had to close because all the workers had to go home. And so their supply chains have been broken. And then we spoke earlier about people who, their workforce have been working from home and how to regain the trust and how to get that, the glue that is the culture to reconnect with everybody. And then finally, you know, it's winning the war on talent. So you've got all these things already on the board agenda, and D&I is sitting at the bottom. And yet, you know, we believe firmly that D&I is a solution. But I think just one step back, just to make sure we're all on the same page, let's just look quickly at what defines diversity and inclusion. So diversity is, it's about a diverse and inclusive culture, and a diverse group of people that comes from obviously a mix of gender, a mix of age, culture, ethnicity, education, background, etc. It's getting that real cauldron and mix of people. And then an inclusive culture is where everyone feels valued, where they feel their voices will be heard, where they're given both the resources and the authority to be able to feel empowered to make decisions. And there are channels in place whereby their ideas and even their criticisms can be bubbled up through the organization without any fear of ramifications. And then when you have people feeling really valued, that their voices are heard, they feel empowered, they become really engaged with an organization. And they then become the biggest advocates. They'll go their extra mile, and they get into what we call the shower thinking time. You know, rather than standing in the shower thinking, well, I must get some more milk today, they might be thinking, do you know what? My mum uses that hair product that we've been talking about. I might go and ask her, you know, how she feels we might improve that product. So it's all about coming up with innovative solutions, and that comes from that sort of where people feel engaged, and it's a diverse workforce. But despite the compelling theory, you know, D&I leaders find a real challenge still, and it's about producing the business case. And if you've got the business case, then you get that vital leadership support to be able to implement initiatives to meet those strategic priorities. You're on mute, Noha, I think.
Yes, I am. Sorry for that. So I wanted to build on what you said and dig a little bit deep into the business case. What does this business case mean? What does it entail? What do D&I leaders need to present to leadership in order to be successful and try and push their agenda into a more strategic place?
Well, it all starts, as far as we're concerned, with the data. You have to know where you are, what to get your baseline, and then be able to show how the needle has moved, which proves and justifies what you're doing, and that provides the business case. And you know, there's various sayings like what measured gets done, you can't manage what you don't measure, etc. And we at Predixa, we're really behind this idea of gathering data. And typically there are two ways of gathering data in an organization. There's the face-to-face interviews, which of course allows to go really deep and explore various themes, but it takes a lot of time. It can be very costly. And it can be quite disruptive because you've actually got to have those face-to-face interviews. The other alternative is to go for an online survey. That reaches everybody, but it tends to be a flat survey where everyone gets asked the same questions. And so in order to replicate that depth of information, you can often end up with a huge raft of questions. And everyone gets very sort of bored and, oh, I can't get behind this, you know, and slight differences in one question to another just to get those subtleties. So what we do is we use AI to combine the best of both. So we get the depth of interview, of a face-to-face interview, if you will, with the speed of a digital online event. And the process takes about 10 minutes. And the way it works is that we have our AI engine is called Ava. And as people come on and start to engage with the application, Ava is listening to what they're saying and reacting in real time by bringing out another statement to verify and to narrow her findings. And it means that everybody takes responds to 60 statements, but the 60 statements that somebody had at the beginning of the process will be different to those at the end. So put it another way, if you pick up your phone and use the panoramic process of taking a photograph, you know how you would, you know, start on this side, hold the button, gradually turn it round, release it, and then you get that panoramic shot. Well, what your camera has done is it's basically taken lots and lots and lots of photographs and then put them all together to give the overall picture. And that's what we do. So Ava is taking lots and lots and lots of snapshots, if you like, of what people are feeling about various aspects about the organization, and putting it all together in a fraction of the time that it would take that if you were going to have the face-to-face interviews. So it all happens in a matter of days, and then we get this wealth of insight that we share with our clients, and we can look at the data in terms of how people have responded according to age, gender, team, location, and of course it's all anonymous, but it gives this wealth of information. And we then highlight the top 3 elements of each category that have come out. So everyone can sort of, you know, celebrate and wave the flags and say, we're doing this really, really well. And we also focus on the 3 elements that need a little bit more work. And we provide that in a prioritized execution plan that's related to the strategic priorities, with a clear idea of, you know, a suggestion of which order everything should be done in. So that gives that baseline. And then, of course, after 3 or 4 months, when you run it again, you can see the improvements. And that's when that provides that business case to the board in order to continue their support, so that you can carry on and monitor and improve as you go on.
So I think this is, yani, to me as a D&I practitioner, you know, I think it's fascinating that, you know, we can have some sort of business application that diagnoses an organization, you know, and especially as consultants, you know, going in to support our clients, diagnoses the situation with D&I in a very holistic way, uses different parameters and metrics, and then eventually we end up with not only the, if I understood correctly, the data and the insights, but also an action plan that can inform future action. And yes, I think what I also find interesting based on what you said is that you really, you know, hammer here on the idea that I want to share with the audience as well, that this is an evolving journey. It is not a one-off for us to create a baseline, but, you know, as Paula was saying, you know, going back to repeat this year on year, looking at the metrics, looking at the shifts that are happening and the improvements to that baseline. So I think it's very interesting. And we could talk on forever, but in the interest of time, you know, I'd like to spend a little bit of the time left that we have on thinking on, you know, what is your advice, you know, as an expert in this field, to D&I leaders today who are looking to elevate D&I in their organizations? What can they do? What should they do? Are you able to support them as well in any way?
Absolutely. And so, yes, so you've got the baseline, and as you rightly say, Noha, we provide this prioritized action plan with all sorts of ideas. But just to pull out a few, I mean, I recognize that perhaps some of our audience, HR professionals, D&I professionals, many of these will be known to them. But for those people who perhaps are not familiar with some of these, let's look at sort of, for instance, how we could improve gender equality. Well, there's the issue of recruitment. And one of the key issues on recruitment is removing unconscious bias. So let's have gender balanced interview panels. Let's provide skill-based assessments. So get people to do a task that actually would be reflective of what they'd actually have to do in the job, and see how well they do. Let's have structured interviews with the same questions that are asked to everybody, with criteria very carefully monitored. And a lot of people are now doing the early part of the process as gender neutral application. And I was reading the other day a lovely story about the New York Philharmonic Orchestra that found that they had their members were about only 10% female. And of course, when it comes to playing an instrument, there is absolutely no reason why that should be the case. So they decided to do blind auditions. And so they auditioned everybody behind, you know, a curtain on the stage. But then they found they had to ask everybody to remove their shoes, because they could often find that they could tell whether it was male or female by the way they were walking. So they did blind auditions without shoes on, and they went from 10% female to 50% female. So, you know, it's very important to try and find all the ways to lose the unconscious bias that we are all subject to when it comes to the recruitment. And of course, we mentioned those millennials earlier. I mean, they are very sensitive to gender equality. So if you want to attract them and keep them, this is very important. Mm-hmm. Generation Z, their purchasing decisions are often influenced by whether an organization is has got a working D&I approach. And then, you know, declare your gender equality targets. So if you want to go to 50%, say when that's going to happen and have the stages in place, you know, publish that. Talking of publishing, publish your salary bands, so people know that if I'm at this position in the organization, I am entitled to earn that regardless of my gender. Make work-life balance a priority. Now, one of the great things that came out of the pandemic is working from home is now no longer seen as skiving. I mean, I'm sitting here and you can see the back of my room. This is what we see all the time with people. And it's very important, particularly for women who share the brunt of the childcare and perhaps for elderly parents. So working from home, getting that work-life balance with maybe job shares, and flexi time. I heard the other day that PwC in London, I think, have basically declared to their workforce, if you want to come into the office, that's fine. But if you don't, that's also fine, as long as you get the job done, you know. Make sure you've got equal career opportunities. And of course, a great little trick is try mentoring, have female mentors for men, so that, you know, people can understand the different ways of leadership, which is really useful. And then when it comes to innovation, this is so key. Innovation, and women are so important in this process. And it's interesting, I just posted, in fact, on LinkedIn today, a piece that I entitled, "If you want to improve your sales, ask a woman." Women wield so much in the way of buying power. And I was reading a really interesting piece from an NGO called Human Rights and Equality, on human rights and equality, called You Matter. And I'll read some of the stats here, but in developed countries, over 70% of purchases are made by women. 68% for car purchases, which at first you think that's high, but then you think, hang on a minute, so many women drive in developed countries, and then why wouldn't it be at least sort of 50% plus a bit more? 93% on food purchases, not surprising there, I suppose. 92% on holiday and recreational activities. And then 91% of women believe that the marketing and product design are not met for their needs. So, you know, there's a real opportunity to tap into the female element of your organization to really help to drive your innovation. And then, of course, creating channels, as I say, to make sure people can pass on their ideas and thoughts, whether they be positive or suggestions for improvement, without fear of problems to them. And then for the board, make sure that their KPIs and that their remuneration package is linked to KPI targets, to D&I targets. Because, of course, you know, once you've got the board having to achieve those numbers because it impacts their pocket, then that's a great way to at least get them started with that support. But of course, once you've got the business case that's rolling on, it'll come anyway. But just having mentioned the board, I just want to revert back to that agenda that we were mentioning earlier, because if we now look at what was on that agenda, let's start off with, okay, recapturing market share and understanding what your customers' needs. Well, I was just talking about the importance of women. So, using a diverse workforce, capturing the essence of what particularly your female workforce feel, as well as obviously the diversity of thought. This is what we're looking for, diversity of thought. That can help come up with ideas to recapture market share. Then the issue of innovation, how best to manage that accelerated digitization, mending the broken supply chains. Again, this diversity of thought, tapping into all of those different individuals in the organization to come up with that shower thinking time and with their solutions, because they're prepared to go the extra mile and they really want to make the company succeed. And then, and also I think to get incentivization and rewards in place for people who come up with great ideas. That's another way of helping that. And then regaining trust and helping people return from working from home. Once some of these initiatives are showing their impact, then shout from the rooftops about it. Let's have those town hall meetings. Let's put it in the newsletters. Let's tell the shareholders and all the stakeholders, and to reassure people that the company does care, that we're putting in place, work balance initiatives. So people who are feeling very anxious, we were talking earlier about resilience, struggling with resilience. That's ways of actually getting to help the workforce, the workforce in coming back from working from home. And then finally, winning the war on talent. Well, if you've got an organization that internally is really beginning to motor with D&I initiatives, and that where people know that a diverse and inclusive workforce is valued, then they're going to tell their mates, and that means that people will want to come and work for you and will stay. So suddenly, what I hope I've illustrated is that whereas at the beginning, I said, D&I is sitting at the bottom of that board agenda. Actually, D&I now sits in the very heart of all of those issues and can help to win those strategic priorities. And it spearhead the solutions to increase sales and profitability, and optimize the very best of a diverse and inclusive workforce that can help with strategic change.
So thank you so much, Paula, for all these enriching insights. It's no doubt that diversity and inclusion is a strength and should be leveraged as a strength for any business operation. And I totally agree with you that the organization not embrace this, particularly post-pandemic and during pandemic, are going to be left behind. I mean, it is people's expectations, stakeholder expectations, and it is a strategic priority that can result in healthy progress on the performance side of any business. So I hope that our listeners have really taken away a lot of great insights today, and I thank you very much, Paula Newby from Predixa. And if anyone would like to connect with Paula for a conversation on D&I, or are interested to actually test or conduct an assessment of D&I in your organization, please reach her at LinkedIn at Paula Newby, or feel free to visit the Predixa page on LinkedIn at Predixa. Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you once again, Paula, for making the time for this Women for Solutions webinar. Thank you.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.